I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Frazier.
Here.
Ms. Hall. Here. Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Marmee.
Present.
Mr. Rath.
Here.
Mr. Willetta.
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
Mr. Bubb.
Here.
Mr. Cost.
Here.
And Mrs. Floyd. Here.
We have all here present this evening. Next on the agenda, we have the invocation by Mrs. Floyd, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Would you bow your heads, please? Almighty God, we thank you for the opportunity to be here to make decisions for the citizens of Newark. We thank you for the many blessings we have in this country, a country that grants us a great many freedoms that many people throughout the world do not have. We ask that as schools end and colleges let out, that you be with those students who are starting on a new phase of their lives, and be with our citizens as we have more young people out and about within the community as the days get warmer and they have much more free time. We ask that you be with people as they go about their vacations over the summer and their day trips. Keep them safe. We ask that you be with us as we meet tonight to discuss the business of the city. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Boyd, you want to start the pledge for us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Mrs. Floyd. Next on the agenda, we have caucus. That's anything the council may have pertaining to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything? Okay. Next, we have the minutes of our May 2nd, 2016 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those? Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have no appointments this evening. We have 2 reports from standing committees, one from finance and one from personnel. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have 1 report this evening from city officials, from our auditor, Stephen Johnson, the operating report for period ending April 30th, 2016. We also have 1 communication this evening from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, transfer application from Inks to Inglefield Inc. at 57 Dayton Road. Without objection, those will also be received and filed. Next on the agenda this evening, we have comments from citizens. There are 2 sections of citizens' comments. One's now and one is after the legislation. This is not a question and answer period with council. This is just your opportunity to make a comment. Does anyone have anything? If you just give your name and address for the record, please. Mr. Butcher.
My name is William Butcher, 263 Union Street. One thing that just occurred to me, I'd just like to know, maybe you got my answer, I'd like to know when Union Street's going to get paved. Another thing, I'd like to know, we got some of these are side streets that has potholes in them. We've been running through them every time I go out somewhere. I'd just like to know what the city's going to do about that. And another thing, I'd like to know when they're going to reopen the downtown area, the downtown streets. But pass.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Anyone else this evening for this first section? Again, there's a second section.
I'll have a comment about Union Street.
That way we can hear what you're saying and have you on a recording.
Yes. I just want to say that I noticed that there was patchwork done on the front side of Union Street just lately, and I think they did a really good job. The roads look a lot nicer.
Thank you. If you just give us your name and address, please.
My name's Alan Birmingham at 92 Union Street.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, now next we have ordinances on the first reading, 16-13.
Ordinance 16-13 by Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, an ordinance amending the position classification, pay range, and department authorization tables of the Department of Safety, Division of Police by creating the classification of information technology specialist and setting the compensation therefore and abolishing 1 police officer.
16-13 will be held until June 6th for a second reading. Next on the agenda, we have resolutions on the second reading.
Resolution 16-39 by Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Governor's Office of Criminal Justice Services for fiscal year 2016 Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Funding.
You've heard the second reading of 16-39. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-39.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mrs. Floyd. Is there any discussion on 16-39? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
And Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
16-39 passes 10-0. Next on the second reading, we have 16-40.
Resolution 16-40 by Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 16-40. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-40.
Second.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 16-40? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
And Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
16-40 passes 10-0. Next, we have 16-43.
Resolution 16-43 by Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Marmee. This is a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 16-43. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Johnson?
Move we adopt.
Motion by Mr. Johnson.
Second.
16-43, second by Mr. Frazier.
Yep.
Is there any discussion on 16-43? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
And Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
16-43 passes 10-0. Now we move to resolutions on the first reading, 16-46.
Resolution 14-46 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Newark to pay bills on behalf of the Income Tax Department pursuant to Section 5705.41D, then and now certification, and declaring an emergency.
16-46 is on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee?
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-46.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mrs. Floyd. Do we have any discussion on 16-46? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
And Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
16-46 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 16-47.
Resolution 16-47, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Newark to pay bills on behalf of Division of Police pursuant to Section 5705.41D, then and now certification, and declaring an emergency.
16-47 is also on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee?
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-47.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cox. Is there any discussion on 16-47? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
And Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
16-47 passes 10-0. Also on the first reading, we have 16-48.
Resolution 16-48 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
16-48 will be held for a second reading on June 6th. And finally, this evening, we have 16-49.
Resolution 16-49 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, a resolution designating allocation of hotel lodging excise tax revenue generated pursuant to Chapter 892 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio.
And 16-49 will be held for a second reading until June 6th. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Thank you. Next on the agenda, again, we have our second section of comments from citizens. Again, the same rules apply. This is not a debate with council. This is just your chance to make a comment. Do we have anyone that would like to make another comment? Mr. Bushman.
Good, my name's William Butcher, 263 Union Street. Somebody told me that you're down Hudson Avenue is going to be a two-way street. I'd like to know if that's true, and I'd like to know when that's going to be taking effect when I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. That is true. I'm not sure when. Anyone else? Anyone from the administration this evening? Assistant Law Director Clippinger.
I will pass. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier.
It was a busy day on Hudson Avenue this weekend. We had a plant sale and a yard sale throughout the street brought to you by the Historical Hudson Association. It's nice to see the community engaged, especially in that area. And then I want to remind everybody of 527 of the Canal Market Street grand opening and food truck on the final Friday. It should be a great event and mark a change in our downtown and all for the better. So it's exciting to see progress continue to be made and this development really coming to fruition. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. I think we're all looking forward to that. Ms. Hall.
I'll pass. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Johnson.
I'll pass.
Mr. Marmon.
I need to call a finance committee meeting for the 31st, and with that I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Mr. Rapp.
Call service committee meeting for the 31st. 31st.
Tuesday the 31st, yes.
Yes. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. Mr. Orlado.
Thank you, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Orlado. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real proud of a group of young people that have been meeting once a month this school year, the Newark Youth Council. The mayor and I have been working to coordinate this program for this, our second year we've done this, and I think this year has been a good experience for the students. They took a tour of the 911 dispatching center. They spent some time with the police chief down at the police headquarters. They went to the Newark Fire Department Station 1 facility. They also spent some time with Judge Stansberry, and then they also went to the service complex and saw some of our city streets being made, and then also talked about the street department and plowing roads. And then finally they ended up the year with visiting the water treatment facility and then the wastewater treatment facility. So these students got some insight onto how city services are operated, and then also the importance of city services and local government. So this Thursday at 4 o'clock here in council chambers, we're going to be presenting each of these members certificates of appreciation, participation, and we invite council to come. The parents of the students will be there, and also the teachers, so it should be a nice sort of end of the school year celebration for them. Again, that's Thursday at 4 o'clock here in council chambers, and I do want to thank the city administrators that participated in the program. It took some time out of your afternoon to meet with the students, and I know the chief had them well over 90 minutes, so and he was even going further for that, but they had to get going. So he talks proudly about the police department, and we're proud to have him as our chief. The next event that's coming up is the Newark Nazarene Church on South William Street is having their neighborhood cleanup this Saturday, and so looking forward to participate and partner with them to clean up, have another neighborhood cleanup, and that's Saturday at 9 o'clock, and it meets at Newark Nazarene. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Buck.
I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Mr. Cost.
The only thing I'd like to say is that, Jeremy, you should be very proud of that group and the job you're doing with them. We certainly are. Thank you. I'll pass.
Mr. Cost and Mrs. Floyd.
First, I'd just like to congratulate all the college students and the high school students who will be graduating in the next couple weeks. Denison just graduated on Saturday, so
Hallelujah.
So there's lots of good stuff out there. The Midland Theater has several new shows this summer. They just announced this afternoon or today. I got an email. Pat Benatar is coming, and Mary Chapin Carpenter, and there's another big show coming in August that's supposed to be a secret. Not sure it is, but it's supposed to be. As Mark said, the Canal Market Plaza celebration, the food trucks will be there from 11 to 9, so it's an all-day thing. There will be music, and the ceremony officially opening it starts at 6 o'clock, so that should be very, very exciting. And finally, I'll call a street committee meeting for the 31st.
I need to call a safety committee as well. I apologize for being out of turn.
Too late. Thank you, Mrs. Floyd. Just a couple housekeeping things. This is a 5-Monday month, so there will be no meeting next Monday, the 23rd. The next committee meeting will be Tuesday, May 31st, the day after Memorial Day. And our next full council meeting will be here in this chambers at 7 o'clock on June 6th. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We'll adjourn. 7.